we have to talk about kind of the word around Mikko Rantanen and the Toronto Maple Leafs right now. It just has to be done. Like I said, Vegas, LA, Dallas, we already knew those teams were involved in these conversations if the Hurricanes were to flip them. So we already know all this. The conversation for me has gotten really interesting because now there's multiple and numerous insiders doing it. And I don't think that's just clickbaiting. I don't think that's just reaching for headlines when you have David Pagnotta talking about it. You have Elliot Friedman talking about it. You have Chris Johnson talking about it. You have Frank Saravalli talking about it in terms of them flipping. And then most of those insiders specifically naming Toronto. So looking at this quote from David Pagnotta, and then also looking at the quote from Elliot Friedman on 590, I believe he also talked about it on 680 too. Like there's many quotes coming out here. This was from Pagnotta. The Hurricanes have asked the Leafs for Matthew Knies to be included in a deal, something Toronto GM Brad Treliving is not interested in doing without a long-term commitment from Rantanen. That's a crazy quote. And then Elliot Friedman goes on the radio and on TV and says the Leafs are definitely pushing for the Brock Nelsons of the world, names like that. But then he goes on to go, they are also very interested and connected with Mikko Rantanen. So he's kind of putting that like a little bit to the side. So again, I don't think Toronto's the favorite here necessarily, but the fact that Matthew Knies' name's out there right now, I'll say this, and I'm asking Leaf fans and people also outside of Leaf land to address this question. If Mikko Rantanen came with an extension, let's put a scenario out there, 12.5 times 7 or 8. Would you do the deal if it meant you're trading Matthew Knies, one of Cowan and Minton, and another piece? You're getting Mikko Rantanen locked up. And keep in mind, Matthew Knies' extension or new contract coming up is going to be over $7 million. I'm pretty confident at that. I think if it's a shorter term bridge deal, it could be in around the $5 to $6 million. But if it's longer term, Matthew Knies is going to be over $7 million. Are you willing to pay the extra $5 for Mikko Rantanen long term? A Stanley Cup winner, a guy that's proven to put up 100 points in a season, a guy that definitely steps up when playing with stars, i.e. a Matthews and Marner. You could afford this if you're moving Max Domi the other way, moving Calle Jarnkrok the other way, or in another deal. Because here's the thing, people are forgetting this. I brought it up already in yesterday's show. Mikko Rantanen was retained in that first deal, 50%, down to $4.6 million. If the Carolina Hurricanes flip him and retain him again, he's down to $2.3 million. Literally any team in the league right now could fit that in with either one contract, small contract going the other way, or with the cap space they have at the deadline. That is easy to take on. So you could get Mikko Rantanen for this playoff run. What I'm getting at is, you don't even think about trading Matthew Knies in this deal unless Mikko Rantanen's signing on the dotted line, basically, as he's getting moved. So if they got like a verbal agreement and it's 100% locked and they gave permission for Rantanen to negotiate a contract with Toronto and Toronto's willing to do that, sure. Outside of that, it's not Matthew Knies. We're talking about Easton Cowan and multiple first-round picks. I would do that still. Tampa Bay is willing to trade first-round picks well into 2027. The Leafs have 2 first-round picks, 2026, 2027. You have prospects like Easton Cowan and Fraser Minton. I don't want them to trade Minton, but if it's a part of a deal like this, with maybe a Rantanen extension, then you start considering it. But I think there's a real chance that a lot of people are talking about Carolina flipping Mikko Rantanen. Toronto's in that conversation. Of course, the 3 teams I just said are probably favorites over Toronto. The scary part, too, is I believe, and I put it out on X, that the Florida Panthers have gained more momentum on this Rantanen conversation. Rantanen next to Barkov would be ridiculous. He played next to him at Four Nations. Barkov, Rantanen would be disgusting. Like actual stupidity. I would not be surprised if Carolina tried to pull like Verhaeghe from Florida in that deal. There's also prospects like Sam Moskevich who could be in there. I think there's a legitimate chance that Carolina could trade in conference, with Florida or Toronto if they're getting one of those 2 big names I just mentioned. Like if it was a Verhaeghe going the other way or if it was like a Matthew Knies going the other way, I think that's the scenario where Carolina does that deal. But again, could Toronto or Florida put up a different package that involves the risk of just, okay, we'll take Rantanen as a rental and take our chances. But I could see those big names being dealt if there was a Rantanen extension in place. And then again, if I had to make my prediction, Dallas and Vegas, throw LA in there as well, are probably the most likely that can make the deal It's a Western Conference, so Carolina trades him back into that conference and then also getting an extension. I would say Dallas is probably number one for that. So a lot of teams, but the Toronto speculation keeps growing, and the fact that Matthew Knies has been named is crazy.